So my name is Renato Reyes Jr. I am the Secretary General of the Bagong Alyansang Makabayan, or in English, the New Patriotic Alliance. It's an umbrella organization of unions, peasant organizations, youth, women, the whole range of sectors that are organized and struggling for national liberation from U.S. imperialism. So, right now, the Philippines remains a neo-colony of the United States. It means that our economy, our politics, military, culture are heavily influenced by the U.S. Agenda, the U.S. imperialist agenda. So the Philippines remains an underdeveloped country because of the continuing U.S. domination of our economy and then the whole aspect of our social life. And these the issues related to the domination of the United States would include unequal trade agreements being imposed in the country, all the way back from the WTO, the APEC, and right now the push for the TPPA. Then you also have unequal relations in the military. So we have agreements in the past, such as U.S. Bases Agreement, Mutual Defense Treaty, Visiting Forces Agreement, and now an agreement that would bring back U.S. bases in our country. The U.S. provides the Philippines a lot of military aid, a lot of leverage for dictating on what kind of policies the AFP, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, would undertake. So the U.S. is engaged not just in military exercises, the U.S. is also influencing how we conduct counterinsurgency in the Philippines, and this includes actual intervention on the ground. So they're conducting a war here in the Philippines unknown to most people in the West. So these are just some of the examples of how the unequal relations with the United States are practiced or experienced by ordinary Filipinos.
Recently, on 28 and 29 April, President Obama visited the Philippines. What was his purpose and how did you react to that?
Well, the Obama visit to the Philippines was basically a reaffirmation of the unequal or neo-colonial relations between the two countries. It's a celebration of the master and puppet relationship between Obama and Aquino. And the visit tackled two major agenda. One was the signing of an enhanced defense cooperation agreement. It is a military agreement that is designed to bring back U.S. bases, to allow the U.S. forces to construct new facilities within Philippine facilities, not just confined to their previous bases, but possibly they can set up facilities all over the country, transforming the archipelago into one giant military installation of the United States. This would also allow the American forces to pre-position their weapons on Philippine soil. So this could include missiles, tanks, ships, planes, and even armed drones. So this is a qualitatively different agreement from what we have now in terms of the military exercises. So this is a very, very dangerous agreement that our country has signed with the United States. The second agenda of the Obama visit was for to give the Philippines that push to join the TPPA. The Philippines has not committed, has not firmly committed to joining the TPPA. It still has to undertake certain reforms or changes with regards to restrictions on foreign investments. So what is happening in the Philippines is that there's a move to amend the Philippine Constitution and remove all existing restrictions on foreign investments and foreign ownership of land, utilities, and other industries previously reserved for Filipinos. So this would be bad news for indigenous peoples, for example, because foreign companies, mining companies, can just own land here. This is bad news for farmers when the agribusiness companies start controlling the huge estates, the agricultural estates. So this is something that we are opposing, and we feel that with the Obama visit and the push for the TPPA, the moves to change the Philippine Constitution will eventually gain ground.
What would you suggest as an alternative? What are your demands and expectations from the US government, and more specifically, of course, from your own government, the Filipino government?
The Filipino people would want to experience genuine progress, genuine sovereignty, as opposed to what we're experiencing now, which is basically we're just dependent on what the U.S. would be dictating on our government. Our foreign policy is shaped by the U.S. agenda in East Asia. So, yes, the alternative, the demand, is for countries like the United States and all other foreign countries, foreign powers, to recognize Philippine sovereignty and respect Philippine sovereignty. Of course, that's easier said than done. So it's not something that they're going to give or hand over on a silver platter. It's something that we have to fight for. We have to fight for that sovereignty and lay the basis for genuine development. And in our case, we would want to have an industrial base. We would want to develop our agriculture. We don't want to be consigned as a backward, semi-feudal country for the next decade or so. So, yeah, genuine development would be the result of national sovereignty. Those are our demands, and it's not well. It's entirely possible that the Philippine government is not one to entertain those demands. In fact, we've been fighting for those demands for more than 4 decades now, and we've come to the firm realization and conclusion that even the puppet government, the puppet Philippine government has to go, has to be replaced by a genuine people's government, and that's something that we hope to achieve as the mass movement gains ground all over the country.
On a more short-term perspective, how do you fight legislation such as the TPPA and EDCA?
On a short-term perspective, right now, what we are trying to do is to stop the implementation of the new military agreement and prevent the United States from actually establishing facilities all over the country. So even if the agreement has been signed, we have lodged 2 petitions before the Supreme Court. Different groups, including former senators, current lawmakers, lawyers, members of the academe, church folks, they've come together to question before the Philippine Supreme Court the legality of this military agreement, with the hope that the court would order a stop to its implementation. We haven't received any restraining order, but the court has now asked the Philippine government to respond to our petition. So there's some movement in that regard. We have also been talking to senators, members of the House of Representatives, to gather more opposition to the EDCA. As for the TPPA, the first step right now would be to fight the moves to change the Constitution. So it's a move that's pending before the lower house. It hasn't been discussed extensively in the upper chamber, but we're confident that even if it passes through the lower house, we can still go to the courts and question it, and we can go to the people. At the end of the day, it would be the people, not the courts, would be the most decisive factor. So if the people don't want the EDCA, and if the people don't want the TPPA, then they will have to mobilize and stop the implementation of these one-sided agreements.
How does China fit into the close rekindling friendship of the US and the Philippines? And how does it affect the Philippines?
Well, it's a very complicated situation. The Philippines now has a dispute with China concerning the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea. And China wants to claim 90% of the South China Sea based on its 9-line claim, drastically reducing the Philippines' exclusive economic zone by around 80%. So that would be a big problem insofar as our sovereignty is concerned. China has been very aggressive in its incursions in Philippine waters and claiming certain islets or areas in these disputed region. Now, we as progressives are definitely opposed to any form of Chinese incursions, and we are opposed to the nine-dash-line claim because we want to uphold our exclusive economic zone. So, the Philippine government has brought a case before the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea to be able to resolve in a peaceful manner the dispute with China. However, the Philippine government has also invited the United States to intervene in this dispute, or at least intervene in Philippine affairs, or allow the Philippines to be used as a staging ground by U.S. forces, thereby further complicating the dispute with China, considering that the U.S. and China are, well, there's a contradiction between the U.S. and China in the sense that the U.S. is trying to contain China as a rising power. So the presence of the United States may pose more harm than good insofar as resolving the territorial or maritime dispute is concerned. Now, the Philippines may end up caught between two giants trying to outdo each other in this region. So what we think is the best for our national interest is to oppose Chinese incursions in our territory, in our waters, while keeping out the U.S. from the picture, opposing any form of U.S. intervention. The funny thing is, ironically, when the U.S. president was asked, will you support the Philippines in the event of a shooting war with China, the U.S. president gave an evasive answer and basically confirmed what we have long thought of, that the U.S. is not going to war with China on the basis of these islands or these disputed waters, and the U.S. has far greater economic interest in China than in the disputed areas being claimed by the Philippines. So the Philippines is inviting the U.S., giving it all these concessions, but the Philippines doesn't stand to get anything when the going gets tough with China. So that's how tragic our situation is right now.
To close off, do you have any message for the people in Europe, or any warnings or any insights?
Well, right now, the peoples of the world, they demand peace. Countries, oppressed countries, demand sovereignty, and countries are extending, well, the people in these countries are extending solidarity with other oppressed peoples, and we are thankful that there are people in Europe who are standing with us throughout these difficult issues, and that there's solidarity between the people in Europe and in the oppressed countries. So we hope that we can carry on this cooperation, this solidarity to achieve genuine peace and to put an end to all forms of imperialist aggression and wars all over the world.
Okay, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the people of Intel and the people of Belgium, if I may be seen as one of their representatives. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you. Great.